glad we got so many people out here. I feel the energy. I know we're feeling good here in Howard County, and I know we're going to deliver Howard County for Governor Hogan.
Yeah! So we have a victory party in Annapolis on Tuesday night. You're all invited. We would love to have you there. It's going to be quite a celebration because thanks to all your hard work today and over the next 3 days, we're going to pull off once again for the third time the biggest surprise in America. We're going to send a message to them.
Yeah. Somber mood here.
I just spoke with County Executive Alsa Brooks, and I congratulated her on a hard-fought victory. As governor, I had the privilege of working closely with Angela. She's a dedicated public servant, and all of us should wish her much success. And Yumi and I offer our best wishes and our prayers to Angela and her family. But now is the time for us to come together and to move forward as one state and one nation to respect the will of the voters and the outcome of the democratic process.
So, what's the story here? What's going on, and who was that bald man? That was Larry Hogan, a Republican from Maryland, a D+30, very, very deep blue state, who was elected as governor not once but twice in a landslide during one of the state's most polarized eras. I'll let Governor Hogan himself tell the story of how this happened.
You know, in 14, I was just a small businessman who had never held elective office, and I was just frustrated with what was happening in our state, and I decided to step up and try to make a difference. And he was a great partner in government, and Alan was a great county executive. Together, we actually did make Maryland a better place. We cut taxes 8 years in a row. The economy grew. We put more people to work, and we were reelected in 18, and I became only the second Republican governor to be reelected in the entire 248-year history of our state, and he became the only lieutenant governor to be reelected in 248 years. And we're very proud to serve you for 8 years, and I really thought I was done with politics.
When Governor Hogan took office in January of 2015, Maryland was saddled with a record-high tax burden, as well as an out-of-control deficit and crime rates. By the time his second term ended in January 2023, Larry Hogan enjoyed a 77% approval rating among voters in the state, and an over 80% approval rating from Democrats. The state itself was left with record low crime rates and a $500 million surplus. Conventional wisdom held that the Larry Hogan brand in Maryland was pretty much untouchable, so it wasn't long before he set his sights on a different office, the newly vacated Senate seat formerly held by Democrat Ben Cardin. I'll again let Governor Hogan explain that decision.
But I was just so frustrated with what was going on in Washington. And I was completely fed up, just like I was in 2014, 10 years ago. Because, you know, Washington is nothing but divisiveness and dysfunction. Our entire political system is fundamentally broken. And all we see are the extremes of both parties who are more interested in winning an argument or calling each other names than they are in solving the serious problems that face us. And I think in times like this, when the country is so far off track, we really need leaders who are willing to step up and try to make a difference. I'm not running for the Senate because I needed a job or because I was looking for a title. I'm only running because I think I can actually go down there and make a difference. And sometimes one person can make a difference. I know it's a difficult campaign and it's a difficult job when you get there, but I really am ready to go down there and make a difference. It's not just about the differences between the right and the left. This is about the difference between right and wrong. And you know, we have people in this room that are Republicans and Democrats and independents. This is not just a typical fight. My opponent wants it just to be about red versus blue. All I care about is getting us back to the red, white, and blue.
I started working for the Hogan Senate campaign sporadically as a volunteer in the summer. I later became an intern, and then I was promoted to the position of field director for the entire county, which was a full-time paid position. In this video, I will be discussing my experience within the Senate campaign, as well as shining a light on the behind the scenes of political operations. And finally, I'll be discussing what I learned from the experience. I hope that you enjoy. Let's get into it. I'm joined with Hunter Petit here, who was, during the campaign, the political director of PG, Prince George's County, if I'm not mistaken.
So Jason was our political director. I am the field director.
You were the field director. Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, so Prince George's County, for those of you who don't know, is Larry Hogan's opponent, Angela Also Brooks' home district. It was where she was county executive. So jumping off, how did that inform some of the campaigning decisions that you guys were making, maybe as distinct from a place like Howard?
So I would say it was definitely a challenge, right? Angela Also Brooks being the incumbent county executive, and Prince George's County, the second biggest county in our state. It's the bluest county in America. Mm-hmm. So it was definitely a challenge. But within that challenge, I'd say that we found lots of hope and lots of ways to talk to voters and entrances into kind of like their minds to understand what they were concerned about. Mm-hmm. Because while Angela is the county executive of Prince George's County, her track record is pretty controversial. Right. And with her track record being controversial, you have many people who have voted for her in the past, who have also voted for Governor Hogan in the past. And lots of our strategy was chasing down those voters who, like Governor Hogan, and the vast majority of Prince George's voters like Governor Hogan, more probably like Governor Hogan than County Executive Also Brooks. It was kind of just bridging that political divide and talking to people and trying to get them to split their ticket.
We definitely had a similar experience in Howard, just in the basis of having to get people to think about the election, not in terms of voting down ballot, but voting for the candidate they like the most in each distinct race. There was no chance that we were going to even come close to winning the whole state without a large number of people being willing to split their ticket. And, people who were never going to vote for Donald Trump, but who might vote for Larry Hogan, even if they wouldn't vote for another Republican. Whether you're a one-time volunteer, a campaign intern, or a full-time member of the staff, your campaigning experience usually starts here, or at a place just like it. This is the Howard County District Office for the Hogan Senate campaign. Places like this typically pop up at the start of election season, and they're part-time affairs. This building wouldn't always be a Hogan campaign building, and it wasn't about a year ago. What was probably here before was a struggling local business that went under, or something like that. And after the campaign ends, they'll probably sell it. Campaigning is a numbers game, and it's a very simple one. You're trying to get as many people as possible to commit to voting for your candidate. And there are many ways to do this, but the most important thing is that you have to actually reach the voters. During the process of campaigning, there are two primary ways to do this. You can either talk to them in person, or you can talk to them over the phone. In either case, the logistics and operations are all planned here. People, whether they're volunteer or paid, will meet up here on specific days, and then they'll go out into various parts of the community to start doing their phone calls and door-knocking campaigns. Here we see an archetypal first-time volunteer entering the campaign office. The first thing he's going to do is grab an official Hogan for Senate campaign t-shirt. Branding and merch is super important on a campaign. It creates a sense of brand identity and also tells voters who you are before they talk to you. Next, he's going to grab some campaign literature. One thing that's really interesting about campaigning is that for the same candidate, there will often be many different independent groups that are sort of working together to reach the same goal, but not collaborating directly. So the official campaign puts out this kind of literature, where it's kind of very like moderate and independent language, talking about, basically very middle of the road stuff that he supports, whereas this would be more for like targeting Republican voters about some of the like his stronger stances, like securing the border, right? That's something that's like very much something that like Republicans would support, and Democrats maybe at least in theory would support it, but like it's definitely something that Republicans would feel more appealed to by that. Something with like fought elitism, right? That's kind of that language of like the populists. Whereas here, this is more like, touting like that he is pro-choice, right? Which is something that like most Maryland voters, especially Democrats, are in favor of. So it's just interesting the different kind of targeted language that you'll see depending on which organization is putting out the pamphlets. The app that all of the campaign coordination is done through is called Numenar. I don't know if both parties use it, but certainly the Maryland GOP does. So what it does is it has basically a list of, they're called walkbooks, which are essentially maps of specific locations where doors have not yet been knocked. Or I guess if the doors have been knocked, it just kind of keeps track of which ones already have been. So here's one that's been complete. A group of volunteers or staff members or interns would get this walkbook assigned to them. This is for people who live in PG County. And they would pick one of these houses to go to. They'd go to it in the maps, and then they would, drive to that location. And then they'd start systematically going to every single house. The other thing that this app is used for is a little bit less exciting. And, well, I guess it depends on your perspective. That would be the phone banking. Phone banking is what we call it. It's really just a bank of phone numbers that we use to make robocalls. So this basically does mass calling. I can set the number of calls that I want it to be making at once. In this case, I'll be setting it to 10. That's typically the default. And then I just kind of start letting it run. I've just clicked call, and I'm going to let it go for a while. Usually people don't pick up, and it just goes to voicemail. But if they do pick up, they're usually not in the mood for much of a conversation. So I'm going to let this run for just a little bit, and we'll see what happens.
No one wants to fall out of heaven.
I'm here with Jihisa. We just finished our final voter registration event of the campaign season. Today is October 15th, which is the voter registration deadline. We've been trying up until this point to reach as many people as we possibly can to get them to register, especially new citizens. And a big demographic that we've been trying to get turnout from is the South Korean population. So, Jihi, could you speak a little bit about what you've been doing with voter registration and kind of what some of the goals of this effort have been?
Oh, sure. Thank you. And many Koreans, they are interested in politics, but some people, like seniors, and many people don't know how to vote, and where to go, and so I have been helping in front of a supermarket or senior
centers, like we're in a senior center right now.
Yeah, I have been helping them to register to vote and request a mail-in ballot so that they don't have to go out to the voting center. Just they can get a mail-in ballot and send out. So many Koreans even didn't know if we can do that mail-in ballot. So they were like very excited about this opportunity, and I think voting is very important for us to speak out our voice to the community. Yes, because in these days when you go like a mart or when you go to school and when you see the news, you see the importance of how important it is to which leader is in charge. So it's very important. So it's been a very good experience to get to know people and to make them to speak out their voice.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of them, they're, like you were saying, they don't have a whole lot of knowledge of our political system, and maybe there's a language barrier, and but they support the Hogan family, right? But they just they don't always turn out. So that's the big thing we've been trying to do.
That's right.
what do you think is like the impact of just sending people out to like reach people at their doors and ask them questions about how they feel about the country and the political state of America and all that? I mean, what have you heard? How did it make you feel about just the state of Maryland or the state of the country in general?
So I think one, it's extremely important, even in deep blue places like Maryland or Prince George's County, where this is a two-party system that we have in this country. In order to have a healthy two-party system, both parties need to go into places where they usually aren't comfortable. And so I would say in this role that directly just kind of prepared me, for that. Prince George is extremely blue. I was working for a Republican candidate. But I guess another plus in terms of that was many people do love the governor, but lots of people don't have a positive view of the Republican Party.
Sure.
And so being able to explain that, yes, the governor is a Republican and, he's a proud Republican. That's who he is. That's how he, was raised. But he's also the exact same guy that you elected twice, the same one who's fighting for you for 8 years.
Right.
That was just kind of our selling point to people.
Yeah, they wouldn't like switch up, in office and
Exactly.
have kind of a backbone and kind of stand up to the things people don't like. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The people like me who were responsible for doing the door and phone canvassing and managing volunteers and that sort of thing are called the field team. And the thing is that even a perfectly run field operation cannot win a campaign for a candidate if the candidate, him or herself, is not delivering the performance that the voters are looking for. I say this because around the middle of October, we hosted at our campaign office a watch party for the senatorial debate between Governor Hogan and now Senator-elect Angela Alsobrooks. We had a ton of our volunteers show up, and unfortunately, and I can say this now that the campaign is over, Larry Hogan did not turn in a stellar performance.
The reason I decided to run for Senate was, the reason I ran for governor because I was frustrated with all the taxes and the unaffordability. Decided to step up to run for Senate. It was because I had never been more concerned.
He made a pretty major gaffe right out the gate. And on top of that, although his whole appeal and identity is built around kind of being like an old-fashioned, middle-of-the-road politician, unfortunately, that was a hindrance to him in this debate because he said some things that kind of made him feel like he was a little bit out of touch with where voters were at in the year 2024.
The reason I got into this race, the final straw for me, was when I watched Republicans and Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell tank the bipartisan deal that was going to secure the border, provide funding for Taiwan, for Ukraine, and most importantly for Israel. And Israel's our most important ally. I don't think you can try to walk down the middle on this issue. I think there's no question we've got to back Israel. I criticized Democrats and Republicans who wouldn't support Israel.
We have technically come to the end of our questions. I have one final one for you, Mr. Hogan. I know you said you wrote in Ronald Reagan's name, that you've already voted. If you had lived in a state that was up for grabs, you said your vote doesn't matter in your state. Is that how you still would have voted?
Well, look, I've never voted for someone I didn't believe in, and I was the chairman of No Labels with Joe Lieberman, and we're all about trying to find.
As a result, we found that after the debate, we had considerably more trouble activating our volunteers. That is to say, when we called them, they either would not commit to showing up, or they'd tell us they'd show up and then they wouldn't. I think they were losing a lot of confidence in the ability of the campaign to win. And maybe for good reason. Of course, a single imperfect debate performance does not single-handedly sink a campaign. We in the field team knew that the election was not going to be over until all the votes were tabulated and the final winner was declared. So we took the last 3.5 weeks and seized every opportunity we possibly could to keep enthusiasm high and make up our lost ground. During the early vote period in the week leading up to Halloween, we had Yumi Hogan, Governor Hogan's wife and the former First Lady of the state of Maryland, come in and join us at a couple different polling locations around the county. Now, Yumi Hogan is sort of a celebrity in the Korean American community in Maryland, and particularly in her home of Howard County. So having her at these polling locations was great for us because people were really excited to see her, to talk to her, to just kind of stand around her. And we got a lot of enthusiasm from voters coming into the precincts that we were at when they saw her. On top of that, Governor Hogan himself visited not only our campaign office, but a number of other campaign offices around the state in the final weekend leading up to Election Day for what was called a day of action. We'll show a little bit of that right now.
First time in the office?
It seemed like every time there was something going on in the office, I had a meeting or something was going on.
Oh, I hope it looks. It's looking much more like a campaign office. Hey, Leo. Good to see you. Thank you very much for coming. How you doing? Hi, Andrew. My dog used to work. Very nice to meet you. Thank you guys very much for coming. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a hell of a night.
Yeah, I bet.
You look tired through your eyes.
There he is.
Referred to as Hogan.
Hogang. Yeah, we're Hogang. Larry's Hogang.
That's so weird, bro.
There's Tori of our media team.
Hey guys! Thank you guys very much. This is exciting. 3 days. 3 days. Thank you very much. Okay, let's get some pictures with the team here. We'll go in. Maybe we get in the basement.
1, 2, 3.
Well, the election is now well in the rearview mirror, and we all know what happened. Donald Trump won, the Republicans took a majority, and Larry Hogan lost. So what are my major takeaways from this experience? In the first place, I'd say that I really learned a lot. I also got to meet a lot of really cool people, folks who were not ideologues, just decent people who really cared about the state, and to that end, they believed that Larry Hogan was the right guy for the job. I'd like to advise people that getting involved in campaigns like this is really not very difficult. In fact, if you're someone who cares about the direction of this country very strongly in one way or another, I would say that you almost have an imperative to go out and volunteer for these sorts of things. You know, if you have the time, if you find yourself just sitting around complaining online about, oh, why is the country headed in this direction? You know, you could be going out there and doing something about it. And it's really not that difficult. On top of that, I want to speak to sort of my reasons for supporting Governor Hogan in the first place, going out there and giving my time. And, you know, I could get into the nitty-gritty of various issues, but really the headline piece is that I think it comes down to the nature of what the Senate is and its role in our constitutional republic. It is supposed to be a check on the power and ambition of the president and his or her executive authority. And so no matter who won the presidency, I figured it would be better to have a guy like Larry Hogan in there than not, as opposed to a bunch of partisan demagogues. You want someone who is going to be very middle of the road as sort of the archetypal senator. With a president is someone who can have kind of a big sweeping vision and, you know, articulate this grand plan, but really the Senate is supposed to be this body of elder statesmen who say, hey, Mr. or Madam President, let's slow down a little bit and think about, you know, the constitutional restraints on your power and some of the more realistic aspects of the ramifications of what you're supporting. Yeah, I think that Angela Alsobrooks just didn't really represent that.
This goes to Ms. Alsobrooks first. There are a number of influential Democrats who are talking about expanding the Supreme Court from 9 justices to 13. And the idea is that if a Democratic president could appoint 4 new justices, there would be a majority of Democratic appointees on the court. Is that something you would support?
I agree with in either increasing the number of justices or term limits, yes.
Angela Alsobrooks, who's Larry Hogan's opponent, has very much on the record openly supported getting rid of the filibuster and packing the courts. And I think that both of these things would basically kill deliberation in our government, like once and for all, stone cold dead.
very much nuclear options.
Yeah, and once they're done, that's like Pandora's box. Like that's not something you can just turn around and undo. Like if the Democrats, for instance, if they wanted to undo the conservative majority in the Supreme Court, they could go ahead and put up 4 progressive Supreme Court justices. They'd say, oh, well, there's nothing in the Constitution that says the court has to be 9 people. We'll make it 13 and we'll add 4 more progressives. And then the Republicans, the next time they have a presidency, can just add 5 conservatives. And now you've got 18 people in the Supreme Court. And so on and so forth, ad infinitum, right?
So I think we kind of have a better picture of things, especially since we now know the national results.
Right.
We know that President Trump is coming back to the White House. We know that Republicans will hold all 3 levels of government. And coming in, and I would say that was a big part of my strategy as I was talking to voters, kind of explaining, especially to very liberal voters, Governor Hogan will be that stopgap that you're looking for in a Trump administration.
Right.
He'll be that person who will, he'll sit down, he'll actually review the legislation. And if it does not, actually help the people of Maryland, he has no fear of standing up to Mitch McConnell or standing up to Donald Trump. Like, he has no fear of that. And now that we see that, many voters and many people or commentators, they were kind of concerned, where it's like Governor Hogan's going to be the 51st vote. Ultimately, we see he would have been about the 54th vote. His getting elected in Maryland was not going to flip the balance of the Senate. Ultimately, what I was explaining to voters was electing him in Maryland, especially the liberal voters, that is something that you can do that and kind of have confidence in your vote and understanding that no matter who's in power, Republicans or Democrats, Governor Hogan will have a seat at the table. Whereas with Senator-elect Alsobrooks, and I have much respect for her, I think she's going to do a good job, but being a straight ticket, Democratic voter in the Senate,
she won't be included in the conversation, basically.
The same way with if this were a red state and she were a straight red vote senator in the Senate, you'd expect that they are only in power when their party is in power. With Governor Hogan, he would have power regardless of who was in power in Washington.
Absolutely, and that would be maybe more pork barreling for Maryland, and more funding of certain projects. Yeah, absolutely. So it's sort of a question of we tried to convince the voters to vote their conscience over their party. Did it pan out? Yes, it sort of did, enough to get 17% of the state to change their mind and split their ticket, but not quite enough to put Larry Hogan over the edge. And maybe that says a whole lot more about the state of national politics and partisanship than it does about Larry Hogan or about the field campaign, perhaps.
I agree. I think it does. And just within, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, Daniel, kind of, I don't know if there's like a term up for it, but kind of like you have a phenomenon where lots of very popular governors in opposite states, so like a very popular Republican in a blue state or a very popular Democrat in a red state, will run for Senate. And lots of times, even though they lead in the polls or they gain lots of recognition, it's just very hard to convince voters to split their ticket on the federal level. And I think that does go to show that partisanship in our country on the national level is at a point where I think it's hurting our country. I'm not a fan of it, and that's why I work this job where every single day I was talking to strong Democratic voters and trying to convince them. Because ultimately, we're not going to win anything if we're only talking to Republicans.
And even like outside the context of electoral races, we as a country just cannot really thrive and reach new heights if we are sequestering ourselves into these different bubbles and not talking to each other. I totally feel that's absolutely strongly. Yeah.
It's like the rain in spring. Take the chlorine out of conversation. Let your light reflect on me. I promise I'm not hiding anything. It's water. We are water. Pure as water. Like a newborn daughter.
Jesus is Lord. Jesus is why we sing. Jesus is the way. Jesus is King. And it's still good music, no doubt. It's God music, I took one of the O's out. We moving close to being more like Mary and Joseph. 2024, you know to vote for. It's saying that I'm Republican, acting like I killed somebody. It's God's blood that I'm covered in. I find it funny how all of a sudden when you try to keep the covenants, there's so much judgment. Apollo Creed between a rock and a Russian kid. We the bridge between the block and the government. Jesus, please help. Jesus, please heal. Jesus, please forgive. Jesus, please reveal. Jesus is Lord. Jesus is why we sing. Jesus is the way. Jesus is King, is King, is King, is King.